introduce Ms. Stephanie Peddicord in the formal way. So she is a lifelong Catholic and advocate of service and justice. She was appointed president of Goodfaith in April 2015 after having served the organization in a consultative way since 2013. She is an executive in the nonprofit sector with more than 15 years of experience in all aspects of philanthropic management. She began her career and ultimately was promoted to assistant vice president at Community Counseling Service, directing several major campaigns and other projects for a diverse client roster, including some of the places that we have here, Covenant House. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know how the Covenant House became Covenant House, it was thanks to actually Stephanie's role in fundraising. Upon leaving that firm, she assumed senior leadership positions at two nonprofit organizations, again, Covenant House in Philadelphia and Interfaith Youth Corps in Chicago, Illinois, respectively, both of which drew upon not only her fundraising expertise, but also broader skill set in administration and communications. In 2009, she founded Peddicord Consulting, LLC, a boutique firm that has allowed her to provide a scope of capacity building services to nonprofit clients across the Delaware Valley. Her specialty is empowering small organizations to think and achieve results like the big guys.
And I will say
mighty. And I will say that she definitely brings that into her ministry role as well. Stephanie resides in Pennington, New Jersey with her husband, 2 children, and a golden retriever. Can't forget that one. They are long active parishioners at the Church of St. Anne in Lawrenceville. She graduated with honors from Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, and earned her master's in public service management from DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. Having had deeply transformative service experiences herself as a teen and young adult, Stephanie views her work with Goodfaith as a full circle moment of opportunity to impact the world, or take over it, around her and the future of the Catholic Church. Our programs, this is from her, our programs are not just about community service. Instead, we really challenge young people to embrace the call of the gospel. That when you see something that isn't right in our world, you not only have the power to change it, you have a mandate by your faith to do so. So with that, as president of Goodfaith, she spearheads visioning, development, external affairs, and strategic planning and partnerships. And so with that, I leave you and welcome Ms. Stephanie Peddicord.
Thank you, Marisali. That was thoroughly embarrassing. I think the most important thing that you need to know about me in this space is I'm a lifelong Catholic. I'm a cradle Catholic. I grew up in Massachusetts. I've always been deeply committed and passionate about my faith. We're going to do a lot of generational discussion today. So technically I fall in Gen X. I'm that weird, like in between the boomers and the millennials. There's like a 5-year gap where we're just like a throwaway generation. They call us the Xennials. But you can look at like where I grew up in Massachusetts and where I grew up in the epicenter of the Archdiocese of Boston. I went to a Catholic high school. You can look at my graduating class in terms of who's still practicing, who hemorrhaged, who left, who's raising their children. And I am in a very significant minority in that group. So as we talk about this today, know that I'm sort of a partner in this process. I'm a parent of 2 adolescents. So if you've encountered any parents of the Gen Zs and the Alphas in your midst, I'm one of them. I'm hopefully a good partner. I know that some of the parents you encounter might not be as friendly or as amenable. But I think coming to this work, I was really placed by the Holy Spirit in this work. I was a consultant. As Marisali said, I always introduce myself in my role at Goodfaith. Maggie Smith is here. Maggie, raise your hand. Maggie's my colleague. She's been with me professionally for 8 years, but she started with our organization as a high school student. So she is someone she's our unicorn, one of many unicorns that we point to of, if you give young people experiences of their faith that transform them, it sticks. It sticks. And I think that's what we're all really looking at here. How do we incorporate and instill a faith that sticks over the arc of the long term? So so we're gonna dive in. We're gonna do some generational conversation. We're gonna do some tangible work. I love that we're a smaller group. If we have time, I brought a game that we can play called Blow Up Your Idea. So we'll see. We'll see how interactive we can be. For context, Goodfaith is an organization. We're based right across the river in New Jersey. We're based now in Trenton. Historically, if you were to look at us, we conducted service immersion. So who takes kids on mission trips of any kind? Yeah, so we hosted those mission trips, working at various nonprofits in Philadelphia. We stayed at St. Raffaella House, which is where Maggie came as a high school student. We were then at the Aquinas Center down in South Philly for a number of years. That's what we did historically. What we started to look at and research, we did our first study in 2018. We had about 5,000 young people that had gone through our programs at that time. Pope Francis was about 5 years into his papacy. He had started the Synod on Synodality on Youth and Vocational Discernment in 2018. And at that point, we were just starting as a church to have our come to Jesus moment, right? We're losing vast numbers of young people. And Pope Francis said, wait a second, friends across the globe, we have to have a conversation about this. We organizationally started to discern, well, I think we have a different narrative to share here, because I had young people staring me in the face like Maggie, who said, I was deeply formed by service experiences with your organization. It stayed with me. It ruined me for life. It changed me in a fundamental DNA way. It changed her in a fundamental way. And then we had lots of other alumni. So we did our first study in 2018, and we looked at if you undertook these experiences as an adolescent, did it stick with you longitudinally? What we're about is the formation of lifelong disciples, right? We're not about changing hearts and minds for today. We're about changing hearts and minds over the arc of a lifetime. So we studied those 5,000 alumni, and we said, proof is in the pudding. We could point to longitudinal faith practice in all of the traditional markers, belonging to parishes. At that point, no young adults were officially belonging to parishes, actually registered. Regular communicants who were attending at least 2 or 3 times monthly. We had these really significant data points. In addition to, we could tangibly point to, this is how I live my life. It's not just I practice my faith on Sunday and then walk away from it. But I can take all of the core tenets of Catholic social teaching and integrate them into my life. I take volunteerism as a framework for how I live my life. So we said, okay, we have the data to proof of concept. We know that service really works. So we started to delve deeper. In 2019, we launched a major initiative called Next Level. If any of you are really into reading, this is our research study. This is 5 years of work. Part of what we wanted to do in 2019 is say, how do we take what is a 1-week mission experience? And I'm sure any of you in this room that have taken your kids on 1-week mission experiences, what happens? They go, they're on fire, they're super excited. Then what? They lose it, right? It's very hard to continue to ignite it. And we heard a lot from young people that had gone on our programs. I come home and there's nothing for me, right? I come home and it just falls apart, or it gets lost in the melee of my life and my schedule. So we crafted a new initiative called Next Level, which was really anchored in youth protagonism together with adult. I keep looking at Thea because she was telling me about her amazing new initiative that she's starting in spiritual grandparenting. But we said, parishes, find adult, non-staff, non-paid employees in your parish that are willing to walk with young people. And together they created passion projects. They were youth-led, youth-defined, youth-ideated, youth envisioned, And some of them took off and were really extraordinary. Some of them totally flopped. And we said, that's amazing. Let's learn from failure together. We did that. We launched it before COVID. It went through COVID. And we really had some extraordinary data points. So this is our 5-year research study that we're now scaling nationally. I'll talk about your visionary leader, Mariceli, who took this. I don't know if she read it cover to cover. This wasn't done yet when we first started talking. But the concept of Next Level was exactly aligned with what she envisioned to do here in the Archdiocese, what Archbishop Perez really envisioned to do in the Archdiocese, which was a paradigm shift, right? We don't want to just prescribe things for youth to come to. We want to empower and equip and give them the tangible skills that they need to take that with them across their lifetimes. So we've crafted something unique to Philadelphia. This will not be a day-long commercial for Y Copy, but we will talk about it at some point. Mariceli's like, I don't know, we can make it a day-long commercial for Y Copy. We'll come back to that towards the end of the day. And then we've taken that same framework and now we're applying it to families across the lifespan. Part of our observation, and this will come not as a surprise to any of you in this room who work with middle school, who starts in middle school? Almost everyone. Has that been the case for a long time, or did that just get lumped onto you? That's been the case for a while? Yeah. High school as well? Yeah. Young adults? We'll just lump everyone in together? Cool. Okay. So part of our observation was we need to start this much younger. We need to start much younger with young people. And the same extraordinary things that we see from engaging adolescents in service works with adults across the lifespan. It will work with younger kids from much younger ages, but we need to equip parents on how to do that more effectively. So that's a little snapshot of who we are and what we're about. I just want to start today with a pulse check. I think the more times I'm in these ministry spaces, the more times I'm just blown away by everything that you all are carrying. And you know, I made a joke of remember youth ministry used to be high school, right? I didn't have a youth ministry at all in my parish in Massachusetts, but it was high school for a long time. And then it was sort of middle school, and it's post-confirmation and young adulthood. So you're carrying a lot. So I just want to take a couple of minutes before we start. Do pair up at your tables. Scale of 1 to 10. Where are you today? This morning, and there's no judgment. This is a judgment-free zone. Okay, there's no judgment. Scale of 1 to 10. Where are you? Where's your heart today? It's rainy, it's cloudy, but the sun did come out yesterday, ever so briefly. So just a couple minutes, pulse check. Where are you? What are you bringing to today? Good, bad, indifferent, ugly? No judgment, judgment-free zone. And share with the person next to you. What was the average? Where are people feeling? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? We're middle of the road. I was thinking today on the way here, it's like, what would I be? I'm like kind of a 6 or a 7, but now that I'm here, I'm definitely a 10. These are the goals for today. We're gonna look at this in three parts. So when Mariceli and I talked about this, probably over the summer, fall, she said people really are sort of looking for generational conversation. You know, what is it to minister to Gen Z and the alphas? And so we'll talk about what's Gen Z, what's Alpha. You guys have the glorious task of crossing generations. And boy, are they a doozy, these two. I live with a Gen Z and I live with an Alpha, so I'm with you in solidarity. So we're gonna start a little bit looking at the ministry landscape, because I think part of what we observed over the course of doing Next Level is really the landscape has shifted. So even organizationally, as an organization that did mission experiences, and you know, they're a little formulaic, right? I mean, you do one, the kids get excited, they do service, they get excited, they're transformed, send them home on to the next group. We really started to notice a shift probably 2016, 2017. One, I think the interest in sort of those formulated experiences was waning. The impact itself felt like it wasn't as powerful as it once was. Then COVID hit, and then it was, everything, the world was literally upside down at that point in time. So we're going to look at the ministry landscape and how it has shifted, partially because the map has changed. Pope Francis says that our job as ministers with young people is to go and make disciples. That's easy, right? Isn't that an easy job? What are the metrics for that, Pope Francis? Because go forth and make disciples needs a little bit more definition. But it's not something where you can plug it into Google Maps and say, make disciples, and off we go, right? The map has changed. The whole framework has changed. I would argue, especially since COVID, but really over the arc of the last 20, 25 years. Certainly since Pope Francis came into the picture 12 years ago. Yeah, 2013. So we'll start with the ministry landscape. Then we'll do some conversation around Gen Z and Alpha. I want you all to start thinking about what does this look like in your home context, because data only matters that's local. All that matters, you can learn all this about, as a Generation Z, look at this, this, and this. The Alphas are this, this, and this. But all that matters is me sitting in front of my 11-year-old kid and how am I responding to him from the perspective of nurturing him in our faith over the arc of a lifetime. That's all that matters. So the hyper-local contextualization of this is what really matters. So we'll build up to that. Don't worry, it's a brief history of the ministry landscape. I won't go too deep in the weeds. Does your work feel like you're marching on quicksand? Yeah, same. Certainly parenting in this generation feels a little bit like we're marching on quicksand. Part of this was, as through the journey of Next Level, we had a National Advisory Council. Our chairperson for that was someone named Dr. Bob McCarty. Anyone know Bob-ish? NCYC? No. So Bob McCarty was not the founding executive director of the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, but he was the second one. The first one, funnily enough, was his wife, Maggie McCarty. They are originally from right here in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. But Bob ran that organization. He was the figure of Catholic youth ministry for 40 years. So he was our top advisor in Next Level. And he was always really helpful for us in sort of contextualizing what did youth ministry look like before coming into Next Level and then after Next Level. So if you sort of look at, and I said it's a brief history, we're only going to look at 25 years, right? What's been happening in the church over the last quarter century? If you looked at the year 2000, and youth ministry as a field is not that old. It's not that old. Like the first document by the bishops, if you view it as that's the start of the field, was in the late 70s, early 80s. So the Federation, the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, which is the official arm of the United States bishops that represent youth ministers, was founded in 1982. So as a field, it's a pretty young field. So coming into the year 2000, youth ministry as a field was just hitting its stride. There was a new document renewing the vision. I know you all look at those bishops' documents and say, wow, that's everything that we really need. But there was a sort of a renewed vision for, we're just hitting our stride, let's hit the gas. And Philadelphia was really a hub of innovation in the field of youth ministry. And then this big thing happened, right? The sex abuse scandal happened. I mentioned I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up outside the Archdiocese of Boston. And this reverberated through our high schools and through our parishes like an earthquake of the highest order. And that had national and global implications too, but locally it was devastating. And still continues to reverberate. Think of how it's impacted your lives as youth ministers with everything that we do now with safeguarding children and child protection. But you're also spending a lot of your time in paperwork, in Virtus training, and all of these other pieces that sort of not distract from, but are in addition to our work of really discipling young people. So you could see coming out of that, if that was like 01, 02 within Boston, you could already see, pre-2010, the early signs of disillusionment and disaffiliation. Part of, for all of you, discipling this generation of young people, why does that matter? Why is it important? It's because the people that were impacted, I was a young adult when this happened. I'm now a parent of the kids who are in your ministry programs, right? So we'll talk about what that impact was, because we now have a generation of young people who were sort of never worse, right? They never were raised in the faith. They're not catechized. They're unchurched, so to speak. And then, of course, the great game changer, Pope Francis, right? So Pope Francis comes in 2013, March 2013, and starts talking in a totally different way. So I think initially the hope was, he'll just bring so many people back to the church. And I think he brought a new life to the church, but statistically, there was no bump in the ratings, as it were. But he did give us a new framework. He gave us a new language. He was talking about things like accompaniment, things that are now very buzzy, very buzzwordy, right? A culture of encounter. All of these new sort of ideas about how we accompany one another. He started really calling us into the Gospel of Emmaus, especially in our work with young people, which was a pretty noticeable shift. So the last 12 years, decade, have really been anchored in Pope Francis. What's been happening in the world? We've lived a lot of life in the last 25 years, and maybe I can skip all of the bullets, but I just listed them here so that you could see. I think part of contextually what was happening in the world, broadly speaking, and in America in particular, has anyone read Bowling Alone? Robert Putnam, sociologist in the early 2000s. And he really pointed out that as a society, and you can see this in the church too, where we used to be very parochial, very parish-based. Again, I grew up in Massachusetts, so you could hit a Catholic church here. This is the Polish, this is the Italian, that's the Hungarian, that's the Irish. And you could reach out your arms and touch one. Pick your flavor of the day. So our community structures for a long time within the United States and even within the church were very parochial. They were very community-based. We had neighborhoods, the doors were unlocked, all of these sort of days of yore thing that we concoct and idealize in our minds about how things used to be. But part of what Robert Putnam said was, listen, you used to be part of a bowling league. Now nobody does anything. We do everything alone. We're this very siloed, isolated community. And he said, I don't care so much about bowling. It's not about bowling. It's more, what does it mean when we don't have community structures to rely upon? What does it mean to us as a society when we're all in this alone instead of together? So I think it's very interesting to look at these two pieces in conversation. And of course, we went through quite a bit. I won't hash them all out, but 9/11, the Enron scandal, multiple wars, 2008 recession, this little thing called COVID-19. And what culminated is just across generations. You really started to talk about this with the millennials. Who's a millennial in the room? So many millennials. The millennials started this distrust trend, so we'll blame it all on you guys. But mounting distrust in institutions, that was church, and again, there's interconnectedness there with what was happening within our church historically at that time. But it wasn't just church. It's government, it's healthcare, it's corporations, it's all sorts of these traditional organizations and structures that we just relied upon, these community structures that were just part of how we do and live our lives and how we exist in the world, God bless you, started to erode. So again, you look at the church and the society in conversation with one another and you say, no wonder we started to dig this major hole in terms of disaffiliation. So I won't go on and on and on about these data points because I know that you all know these data points. You live these data points. This year, an estimated 1 million people will walk away from the church. That's lowercase c because that means Christianity writ large. That's not just unique to Catholics. 8 out of 10 baptized young adults leave by the time they turn 21. 8 out of 10. So when my daughter, there's really fascinating data about how and when we drop the bodies along the side of the road. I sort of liken parenting children on their faith journey to traversing the Grand Canyon, and how do you get from one rim to the other side, right? If you look at sacramentally, families that bring their children to baptism, so they're here, they're showing up, their kids are getting baptized, right? Yay, us. Between baptism and First Communion, which is the next mile marker, I guess technically communion and reconciliation go hand in hand, we dropped 7% of those families. So 7% of the kids that have been baptized are no longer with us, right? So that's the first rim of the canyon. Who wants to guess between baptism and confirmation, how many we lose? 53%. So between baptism here and all the way here, we're losing 53%. So the big hemorrhage is coming between First Communion and confirmation. And this is not my lived experience because my kids are both in the sacraments, but it's my lived reality, and I see it all the time because we're in the busy phase of life, right? There's 1,000 things. We have oftentimes multiple things, 7 days a week. Travel, sports, activities. We were just talking about this as you welcome your little one into the world. And it's not just sports. It's theater, it's music, it's art, you name it. And the extracurriculars will suck you in. So part of it is what are we doing as church to put the stopgaps in place to transform hearts and minds in such a way that we're not, again, leaving those bodies along the side of the road. Median age of disaffiliation is 13. That comes out of a book called Going, Going, Gone, which if you haven't read, that's a 2018 book. It's an excellent book. Bob McCarty was the lead researcher on that. It's published by St. Mary's Press. He'll be excited that we're giving Going, Going, Gone a plug. Part of it was Bob went to actual young adults who disaffiliated and said, tell us why. Judgment-free zone. Tell us why you left and what we could have done differently. And I'm trying to go through in my brain, what were the reasons of the disaffiliation? Do you remember? I mean, it's mistrust. Mistrust was a big one. Hurt from within the church. Marcella and I were just talking about that. Actual tangible experiences of abuse. Apathy. A disconnect between what they identify as a values gap, a disconnect between what the church says that it is and what it is in reality. Right, or they go and practice in other faith communities. Most parishes in our region, I have not seen a lot of data about this, report mass attendance around 40 to 50% of pre-COVID numbers. I don't know if that's because our parishes around us in New Jersey are super depressing, or if that's accurate, if that accurately reflects what's happening on a national level. Because I do think we've probably bounced back a little bit more than that. So I say this not to overwhelm and not to continue to hone in on this. I think it's taken us a long time as church leaders and church ministers to wrap our brains around this, right? It's a lot. It's a lot to sort of say, oof, 8 out of 10? How are we losing 8 out of 10 by the time they turn 21? We're going to get to the practices that make an actual tangible difference. But part of what our argument was and our hypothesis was going into and out of Next Level was maps only work when they match the territory, right? So if you're using an outdated roadmap from the 1970s, trying to navigate around traffic today through the streets of Bucks County, you're not going to get to your destination, right? We can't use our old strategies to engage young people of the here and now. They will not work. We've had a lot of our own organizational come to Jesus moments with, okay, what have we done for a really long time? And it used to work. It worked 5 years ago, just before COVID. We can point to and we're like, but it's just not landing anymore. Why? And what do we need to do to change it? So we've recalibrated quite a bit. If you're excited, this is a longer conversation with me and Bob McCarty about the church landscape. Bob is just a wealth of institutional history and knowledge. So we took an hour and we went through this whole piece. He's very good at connecting the dots and understanding where we fit within the broader landscape. So if you're interested, it's on our website. Okay, so we're gonna pause. Again, I'm gonna let you all talk. These are 4 pictures. When you see these realities of what's in front of you, 8 out of 10 leave. You think about the traversing the Grand Canyon. We're losing 53 bodies, 53% between baptism and confirmation. We know after confirmation, the story doesn't get any better, right? Because between confirmation and the early 20s, they're gone. 8 out of 10 have left, right? So when you think of those pieces in your own context, what does that stir up in you? Which image resonates with you? If you're a visual person, which image resonates with you? I said, what overwhelming, feeling overwhelmed, and this is what Google Images recommended for me. So I don't know. That's what that picture is designed to denote. Does it feel like you're at a crossroads? Does it evoke feelings of overwhelming you? Does it feel like you're pushing a wheelbarrow full of bricks up a steep hill? Or do you see it as signs of opportunity in life? And there are no wrong answers. So again, pair and share. You guys just seem to share as a group, and that's fine. You do you. Try to talk with someone who you didn't talk with before. You don't have to get up and move around. You can if you want to. But yeah, take a few minutes and where are you feeling on this? Yeah. Let's talk about the generations that you're seeing in real time. Normally we would say the story of a generation, one generation, that would be hard enough. But you're crossing 2 generations, so applause to you, yay. Some of you literally, all of the things, young adults. So it goes back as far as 97. So those are the young adults amongst us. Really, I mean, almost 30-year-olds. So, right? I'm doing that math, right? And then my daughter is a 2009. So my daughter and she's a freshman in high school. So these are your current high school students all the way into young adults. And as you know, young adulthood, we define as a Catholic Church between 18 and 40. So... So if you're feeling challenged in how do I minister to people that are college students, young professionals, graduate students, parents, getting married, and by the way, high school students. And then the alphas. The alphas are 2010 to 2024. So Maggie, you're going to bridge generations too. You'll have a Z, or no, not a Z. You'll have an alpha, and whoever. I guess the betas are the next ones. So we're already into a new generation. So you see sort of the vastness. Again, this is why we looked at 25 years of the ministry landscape, because you're dealing with 25 years of the ministry landscape. main character energy is a thing, right? They tell me on TikTok, it's a thing that you're supposed to lean into your main character energy. We talk about it a lot at Goodfaith because Pope Francis uses this other, Thea was talking over here about, back in the day, we never talked about things like accompaniment and lifelong formation and conversion. We never talked about protagonism, although in the Hispanic Church, they've been talking about protagonism for a long time. Protagonism, how do you place yourself as the main character in the story that God is writing for you? How do you place yourself? And it's a really boring story if you're just sort of ambling along. So part of what we've really tried to do through Next Level, through our other initiatives, is get young people to lean into that. And we define protagonism, we'll get to how we define protagonism, but it's different than leadership, it's different than agency, because it's a combination of all of those different things, but it's really a deep understanding and knowing of who am I, what's God's plan for my life, what's my meaning and purpose here. Defining characteristics. The funny part is that alphas, we don't really know yet. They're still pretty young, but you've all worked with Gen Z for a long time, so none of this will come as a surprise to you. Gen Z is really known for being the generation that has come of age during the proliferation of smart technology. I was in a presentation last year, and that researcher, she was based out of San Diego State. She wrote the Me Generation, the book, The Me Generation, about millennials. I know, grown, but that was like the first really comprehensive look at millennials. She's doing the same one about Gen Z. And she said, you can really track one of the reasons Gen Z feels really pronounced and really different from previous generations is because their shift has been so severe, and she can trace it to 2012, which is when, the iPhone was introduced in 2009, 2008, but nobody knew how to use them. Remember when it was so cute? Nobody knew how to open their iPhones. And part of it was the iPhone was only on AT&T. Nobody had AT&T. So if you had to switch your cell phone plans. This is ancient times, everyone. You had to switch your cell phone plan if you wanted an iPhone. And then Verizon introduced it. So by 2012, everyone was on one of these. She can track increased rates of anxiety, depression, all of the things to 2012. The introduction of the smartphone, because it was just everywhere. And that's not to say that defines everything, but the really pronounced shift can be directly linked, directly correlated to that. So they're sort of the tale of two cities, and I'll find it, but Gen Zs are known for being hardworking, entrepreneurial, deeply socially aware and engaged. And again, they go back 1997 to 2009. So they've lived through some major things. Obviously, the proliferation of social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, when Facebook was still cool for younger generations. COVID-19, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Arab Spring. We're going back 10 years. So they're deeply socially aware. They're more interconnected than any previous generation because they can pick up their phone and be connected to someone literally on the other side of the world in a matter of nanoseconds. So on the one hand, you have these pieces. They are ready to engage, but they also are the anxious generation. There's many books written about the anxious generation. There's a loneliness epidemic. 80% of young people within Gen Z identify either being depressed or having felt feelings of depression. That same research out of San Diego State can talk about instances of all sorts of mental health behaviors, ideation, cutting, self-harm, and the peaks are all related to the introduction of smart technology. At the same time, you look at data around, they're a very self-important generation. If you If you look at data from the 1940s and they would ask young people at the age of 18, do you view yourself as a very important person? 8% of 18-year-olds would say, I'm a very important person. 2005, they asked the same question. Do you feel like you're a very important person? 80% in 2005. Who wants to guess what it is now? 100%. At the time, it was 95%. So 95%, I'm a very important person. I mean, part of this is us as parents snow plowing their way through. You're so important, you're so unique, you're so wonderful. And of course, my kids are really important and wonderful. But we have this dichotomy of young people feel this deep sense of, I am an important person, I'm here to make a difference, I have all the tools and skills and everything at my disposal, but I'm crippled by depression, I'm crippled by anxiety, I'm crippled by, I would argue, life skills that prohibit me from engaging. I don't know how to have a phone conversation because I do everything by text. I don't know how to sit one-on-one and be okay with having a conversation. My kids, I'm adamant about eye contact and shaking hands, and how do you do that? Part of the parenting challenge of this generation has been this is happening in real time, right? So as parents, no one's known how to react. It's like, oh, everyone's getting a cell phone? Sure, okay, cool. Is it dangerous? I don't know. It looks cool, it's fun. The kids seem to be able to navigate it. So I think it'll be interesting as the Gen Zs become parents themselves. Sometimes these social changes are so vast. And that's what this researcher was saying, it's so pronounced. It's rare that you can point to like a generational shift and it's like so pronounced. And that is what has happened with the Zs. And then you layer all this other stuff on top of it. I mean, we have worked organizationally with young adults for a long time, including Maggie herself back in the day. The shift before COVID and after COVID is vast. So vast. Their stamina, their social anxiety, I mean, actual addiction to phones and stuff. It was so pronounced. I mean, we have totally shifted our approach to a lot of things, in part because we said, oh, young adults are not equipped and ready to do the work that we need them to do in front of high school students. Like they can't show up in the way that we need them to, or the way that we've come to expect them to historically. So I think the data about COVID and the pandemic is yet to be written. I mean, I say this all the time around my experience of parenting, the train wreck that was homeschooling of my children in that spring. My son, who's dyslexic, was in first grade. I mean, it was catastrophic for him. And between, Maggie knows this, but we were one of those families that 2 weeks into the lockdown, we bought an RV because I said, my son is collapsing onto himself, like in on himself. We gotta get out of here. Fresh air, nature, something to infuse him with life again. And me trying to beg him, just write one letter on this piece of paper so we can hold it up in front of the screen and be done with this. So he was a young child, right? But young adults who were in this critical life stage, their college experience is truncated. The high school students who couldn't socialize and engage with peers. We're going to be writing about this for a long time. So I think part of it is the complexity of the parents are here and present, but you want to talk about parents ministering without a map, or the map is wrong for what you're doing. Parenting without a map in this age. So the alphas are your early middle schoolers, right? I guess early 2010, so they're your 8th graders, probably, confirmation age. My son is 11, he's in 6th grade, all the way down to Maggie's toddler, who you won't see for a couple of years, right? Which is wild. The fact that they're in the same bracket is funny. I think part of, if you look at this in conversation with the data that we were talking about earlier about the church and the world, right? These are now the children of the folks that disaffiliated in the early 2000s. So they were sort of the never were's, or the barely theirs. Maybe their grandparents said, well, wait a second. My father may or may not. So my sister, we went to the same Catholic high school, had the same peer group. She has 2 kids. They are not churched at all. My father may or may not have taken him to the parish to get those kids baptized. But they are unchurched. I think about, I tell this story of going to the funeral of one of my high school best friends. So this is Worcester, Massachusetts, which in its heyday was probably 99.999% Catholic. And again, you could stick your arm out and hit a Catholic church. So this is 3 generations of Catholic family, right? Amy's mom was deeply religious. So the funeral's in an old school Catholic church, deeply religious. Amy went through all the same things that I did, but for the most part, I would say identifies as Catholic, but is in all effects disaffiliated. They're not practicing. And then her children are not anything. They're unchurched, not baptized, not anything. So at their funeral, I said, this is a fascinating sociological experiment, because back in the day, even if you weren't deeply Catholic, you knew all the rules. Kneel, stand, sit, pray, do, So you could see Amy's mother's peers knew what to do. My generation, which shame on all my Catholic high school students, even if you haven't been in 30 years, you still remember, right? They acted like they didn't know what to do. I said, we all went to the same Catholic high school. We stand now, we join hands, we sit, come on. Didn't know. And then the children knew none of the things. And I said, this is fascinating. This is a fascinating microcosm of what's happening nationally. Massachusetts, I think, is probably a little bit more pronounced. This isn't the case in other parts of the country. But I think we're probably looking at, is this one of the most unchurched generations in American history? Interestingly, if you follow the Pew study that comes out every spring, it's always bad news, right? Always bad news, especially for Catholics. This year is the first in like 30 years where they show a leveling off. So take that for what it is, but it's leveled. There's no drop in affiliation. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but it is a leveling off. And then, we'll see. I think we talk a lot organizationally about the emergence of and influence of AI and what impact will that have on our kids. It's disastrous. It's so fascinating. My daughter has ChatGPT. Again, she's a freshman in high school. They have tons of rules and strict guidelines. She goes to Mount St. Joseph in Flowertown. Very strict guidelines about what is allowed and what is not allowed academically on ChatGPT. So she has it on her phone. You can engage ChatGPT as a friend. Yeah. It's weird. I mean, she was doing it to bait me into reacting. She knows I'm gonna be all up in arms about it. But also to bait it into saying funny things. But I mean, we were commuting home from, she rose crew. We were coming home from crew practice. She's like, listen to this. This is really funny. I'm going to engage it. Will you be my friend forever, ChatGPT? Oh, yes. Beth. And I mean, it just went on and on and on. I think for us in this room and in similar settings, the conversation has to be, how do we keep our kids anchored in Imago Dei? You are not built in the image and likeness of artificial intelligence. You're built in the image and likeness of God, and you're a real person in the here and now with real meaning and purpose. You have to have real connections with real people to do that. How are we equipping them to stay anchored in that while all of this emerges at lightning speed, I think is the question. So Here's an alpha in his wild habitat, in his natural habitat. I did not tell him that I put his face on the big screen. This is my guy. This is my John. This is how you identify an alpha in the natural habitat. What now?
The socks, the mid-calf.
Mid-calf, I mean, John tells me this is drippy. What he's wearing is drippy. So we'll get to the lingo on the next part. This is drippy. He thinks this looks good. So if we start, I guess we'll start. White Crocs. It doesn't matter how disgusting they are. And I said, white? No, we're getting black Crocs. Oh no, they have to be white Crocs. So we are on our third pair of white Crocs for the year. He has winter white Crocs that are lined for the sweat. You're just as bad. You're just as bad. The white Crocs, the Nike white socks that are pulled all the way up. And I said, this is atrocious, John. Right. Ridiculous. Shorts year round. I don't know if that's just my son or if it's all of the boys. It's all of the boys.
Middle school boys.
Right. Oversized hoodie. This one is actually a little bit small. We had to replace it because it wasn't big enough. Shorts year round. Now, my son plays hockey. So he calls this flow. We used to call it a mullet back in the day. What you can see is the atrocious, part coming out the back. Salad is another term for it. Some people call it alpaca hair. They look like alpacas that have just gone through a wheat field. Ridiculous. But if you are outside of any middle or high school at any given time, this is what they look like. As cute as he is. Isn't he cute? He's sweet. John is 11 and figuring it out. Okay. And then the lingo. So I'm going to quiz you and see who knows, who can speak alpha. Okay, and this is just a snapshot. My kids would be like, Mom, that's not what it means. It's not what it means. Okay, drip. Who can define drip or drippy? Yeah.
It means swag.
Swag.
Yeah, they like the way they look.
They like the way they look. So in my 11-year-old boy's brain, this is drippy. And I was like, I don't know, man, but this is drip or drippy. Riz.
Charisma.
I love it. Yes. Charisma. So if someone has Riz, it's a good thing. My kids, I try to use these things and then they're like, oh, Mom, please stop. I'm very cringy, according to my kids. Cringe should go on here as well. Cap or no cap?
Lie, no lie.
Lie or no lie? No cap, yeah. They use no cap, I feel, more than cap. Ohio, this is where we get into the really ridiculous. And it's just it denotes something uncool. Oh, poor Ohio, right? I mean, I don't know why Ohio got picked on. Skibbity. Skibbity? I need to look it up. I'm going to go back and look it up. Skibbity, yeah, I'll go look it up because now I don't know. And then skibbity toilet is just a way of saying something stupid. It's sort of even a space filler. They'll just put it into conversation. Skibbity toilet. And I'm like, you're speaking a foreign language to me. Sigma. No?
Sigma's good.
Sigma's a good thing. Sigma is a cool thing. Cool. If someone's Sigma, that's a good thing. Were you going to say something? No. All of this has come out in the last couple of years, and I don't know if it's a YouTuber made it famous. Skibbity is definitely a meme or a YouTuber made it famous. Right. So skibbity means...
It's a nonsense word with no inherent meaning, but
Right.
it can be used to describe something as cool, bad, weird, or dumb.
Cool, bad, weird, or dumb. So literally it could mean anything. I followed there's a national movement which was created by millennial parents called Wait Until 8th. Wait for 8th grade. Because the trend, at least in our peer groups, is cell phones in 5th grade. The kids turn 10 and they get a smartphone.
What is who wrote the book with Dr. Becky? John, what's his name?
I don't know.
With an H.
Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah, he just wrote the
Pulled
book
him up.
on the anxiety piece.
Mm.
Dr. Becky Kennedy is like the millennial parent whisperer person or whatever, but who I love.
Yeah.
But they've talked about like school movements of like moving schools to no cell phone schools and stuff. So even like later, they're saying like 16.
Right.
Now, for the smartphone.
Right. As far as you can punt it down the field is sort of the recommendation. My son's school just instituted yonder pouches. So when they show up for school in the morning, they have a locked case that they have to put their devices in. Yeah.
Put his watch in there.
He has to put his watch in there. Anything that's smart technology in any way. Yeah.
You can already find on YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
Or things that show how kids are eating those.
Oh yeah, how to get around it. Well, I know, right? We'll swap. Yeah, I'm going to tag you in. We were having a conversation earlier about cell phones on programs, right? And historically, we are a no cell phone policy organization, partially because the kids are out of community service. You're not going to be on your phone. It's disrespectful to the people that you're serving. It's disrespectful to the host organization, all of those things. It also just takes you're not in the experience if you're on your phone. But that has been like, it's very unpopular among kids. And for many years, they would bring decoy cell phones. So Maggie, if you're bored over lunch, Maggie can tell you stories about having to like do bag checks because the kids they would turn in their decoy cell phone. They'd turn it.
They would leave their decoy phone behind during we had 1 hour of cell phone time a day, and they would leave it in the bin. And I was like, why would you leave your phone in your bin? And then they'd be like in their room on something, and I'm like, great. So anyway, they're just.
So additional resources, there's tons and tons of generational stuff. So Access is like a resource specifically for Catholic parents. They have all sorts of studies and guides, a parent guide to TikTok, a parent guide to YouTube, a parent guide to this, a parent guide to Instagram. But I was working on this presentation on Tuesday and they came out with Gen Alpha, what you need to know. And I said, oh, great, that's exactly what I need to talk about. So Access is a good place. They have tons of things. Most of their resources are free. Springtide Research Institute has done a ton of research on both, really going back to millennials, Gen Z, and the alphas. They've done a lot of work on accompaniment and relational authority, stuff that's really informed us as an organization. And then a newer organization that is started by the former researchers of Springtide Institute is called Future of Faith. They just came out with a study of 1,000 American teenagers. Their focus is really on listening. Increasingly what they find is that the most important thing for engaging young people is listening. We do something on all of our programs called Gifts and Challenges, which if you know anything about Ignatian spirituality, consolation and desolation, look at the arc of your day. We call it Gifts and Challenges to make it more approachable for young people. So at the end of every day, no matter what we're doing, I do this with my kids. They greet it with mild enthusiasm and groaning, highs and lows. Again, we'll sort of do this at our tables. Just take 5 minutes, talk about what are some of the gifts and the challenges that you're experiencing of working with both groups. Because they are different. Part of it is developmental. Middle school is different than high school. We know this. But what are some of the gifts and challenges? What are the highs and lows that you're experiencing in your everyday ministry context of working with both Gen Z and maybe the complexity of trying to navigate both simultaneously? We'll take about 5 minutes to do that. of what I want to say and continue to affirm, this is actually Josh Packard. The only data that matter are local, right? So we can have all this national data, we can have all this generational data. Josh, who studies generations, would say generational data don't mean anything. It gives us context, right? But the only thing that matters is the kid that's sitting in front of you. The only thing that matters is the youth group that you have in front of you. The only thing that matters is your own child who's trying to navigate, right? So how we take the knowledge of these data points and make sense of them within your own context is really all that matters. Sigma Francis. I guarantee my kids would be like, Mom, that is not the right way of using Sigma. But I think Pope Francis is the coolest. So he's Sigma to me. Pope Francis, we mentioned at the beginning, but he's really called us into a paradigm shift as church. So we're about a decade into that paradigm shift. We never talked about accompaniment before. It's all we talk about now. We never talked about encounter. We talked a lot about service, but really a culture of encounter is something that he's called us into. Protagonism is this idea that Pope Francis has really driven home. And as Catholics, we're like, what are you talking about? We show up, it's prescribed. We come to church, we know when to sit, we know when to stand, we know when to kneel, we know when to pray, we know it's prescribed. And what Pope Francis is saying is, you need to engage this as an individual person in your own context, in the here and now, and find this piece, which is really what we view as protagonism, a recognition of why I was made, why I'm here on earth, and what the Lord's plan is for my life. We have a number of colleagues that work at Fuller Youth Institute. Has anyone used Growing Young? Yeah, Growing Young is a really good resource. The people at Fuller are so smart. They have a different book. It's the same idea, different title. They call it 3 Big Questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? What difference can I make? And I said, wait a second. Where have I heard that before? Pope Francis. This is from Christus Vivit. This for us is the crux of everything. If we can equip young people to understand over the arc of a lifetime, right? I mean, lifelong conversion is something that we never talked about before, but a constant discernment of, why am I here? Why was I made? What's my plan for my life? And again, in this conversation of AI and smart technology and all of these things, if we keep our young people anchored in this, I think we have a shot. Don't quote me on that 10 years from now. And then this last piece, what Pope Francis tapped into very early on is this concept that young people have a desire to change the world. We know, starting with millennials, they were the most socially engaged generation in history. And that has continued with Gen Z and will continue with the Alphas. They are so socially aware of everything that's going on, and they pay attention and they absorb it and they process it. They have immediate access to information across the globe. So our ability to lean in and equip them to be protagonists of change. You're not a bystander. Jesus wasn't a bystander. You young people are it. Go out, find your passion, use your gifts, and go forth and change the world. To the extent that we can equip them to do that is the key, right? Because they don't know. They haven't been equipped. They don't necessarily know the ins and outs of how to do it, but to the extent that we can equip them to do it, this is what Pope Francis is calling us into with ministry with these generations. And I would argue, Father DeLacy has said, this is true of adults too. We talk a lot about young people, right? But so much of our data of adults who accompany young people, they are constantly saying, oh, wait a second, I'm 60 years old. I've never been asked what God's plan is for my life. I've never been called. So I'm accompanying these young people on these discernment questions, but I don't know. Maybe I knew that 30 years ago. Maybe I knew it when I got married. But who am I today in the here and now? And what's God's plan for me right in this moment? Protagonism. So this is our research. Again, I have a nice long document. I'll share a podcast where Maggie and I talk about all these things. Part of what we did, we crafted Next Level. And again, in the simplest way, it was a parish-based program, a cohort of young people. We said 3 to 5 young people parishes. You can find 3 to 5 young people. And a lot could not. And find 1 to 3 adults. And a lot could not find 1 to 3 adults. But the parishes that did and stuck with it, we said, find these cohorts and help them to discern a passion project. And then it was the young people's charge to lead their parish in an effort of their own choosing. So this was a long process. Some of these parishes started with us in 2019 and are still going. We're like, you're still here? You're still with us? And they're like, yes, let's go. We encourage them to draw from their lived experience. What are needs around you that you care about? Mental health, food insecurity, immigration, things that mattered to them that they could see right outside their own front doors. How they crafted it, what the iteration of that project looked like. We said, let's help you to discern your skills. What are your gifts? You've got 5 kids here. What are you good at? What are you good at? What are you good at? And how do you together form something rooted and anchored in that? And then we equipped the adults to just walk alongside. We learned a lot along the way. That's why that document is so long. But it is good and interesting. Part of what we started to delve into, we said, okay, service transforms young people. We know that. But what is it really? It's not just going to the soup kitchen that transforms them, right? It's not just working on an issue that's important to them that transforms them. It's all the inner workings of the Holy Spirit that are transforming them. So we started to analyze them through what we call this pathways framework. And what we saw was across the data set, so we have about 200 young people in this data set. Across the data set, young people emerge with core competencies in these 4 areas. The ability to form peer and intergenerational relationships, the ability to listen and communicate effectively, the ability to share my prayer life with someone else, accompaniment, encounter, the ability to see the needs of the world around me. The vast majority of our kids at the end of this experience said Catholic social teaching is the framework by which I live my life now. And we said, that's it. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, if nothing else, we did that. And we do that through intentional experiences of service and encounter, as informed by Pope Francis. Protagonism. To what extent do young people have the skills, the competencies to lead, to engage others, to plan, to speak in public, to get up in front of their parish community and say, we're kids, we care about this, we want you to join us in this effort. And again, it's an intentional process to lead them through that. But to the extent that they recognize themselves as leaders and as agents of their faith, it's about agency instead of being recipient, right? And finally, spiritual imagination, the ability to recognize the work of the Holy Spirit in my life and articulate it. That I see this not as because I'm a leader, I'm a good kid out in the world, but because I'm a Catholic young person, this is what I'm called to do. God's called me to be something of meaning and purpose. And for them to be able to articulate that was something that we were really driving at. And it is very hopeful. This is a lot of work, I will say that. It's a lot of work, but part of it is inviting people into a paradigm shift. This is the link to this book. You can read it online. There's stuff in there for parishes. There's stuff in there for ministers. There's 1 page for pastors. This is the easiest job you'll ever have, pastors. You need to know kids by name. You need to have show up for one of their meetings about their passion projects. You don't have to come every week. Just come once. I mean, it's very, very basic of this is how you can show people that you're on the journey of accompaniment with them. And that's a huge delineator. There are markers of how to make your parish hospitable for this type of thing to take root. Because what we saw in places that it failed, we said, oh, you all have the same characteristics too. We didn't say it in that way. But the markers of this is what can tank it in your parish community. So what does all that mean? We've got the generational data. We've got the Francisms. I don't know if that's an official word. I'm coining it here and now. If you walk away with that one quote, it's that quote about vocation. Why I was made, why I'm here on earth, what's God's plan for my life. And then,
Can you give me those two again? Why was I made?
why was I made? Why am I here on earth? What's God's plan for my life? And that's from Christus Vivit It. How does this apply to your context? Part of what we've done here in Philadelphia is take this research, this body of work, and apply it here in Philadelphia through this initiative called Why Copy. But we took all of these key pieces, everything that we knew that worked from Next Level, and we crafted something unique to Philadelphia. Part of why I think again, I'm jumping ahead because we'll talk about it over lunch, because I want you to think through, okay, I have these big data points, I have these best practices. What does this look like for me? What does this look like for me? This is sort of the paradigm shift. We've been talking a lot about how we're inviting you as ministers into this work. This is the paradigm shift that Pope Francis is calling us into. And it's not that we're dropping any of these things. You know, we were talking with Megan Bissell and Josh Packard on our podcast, and Megan Bissell said, don't get rid of youth group. People love pizza. And I said, yes, we do love pizza. Like, we're from New Jersey. We've got good pizza. Don't let go of these things. But how do you start to integrate and shift towards incorporating them in this way? From recipient to protagonist, where I'm not just receiving inputs, but I'm able to take those inputs and then go out in the world and do something with them as a young person of faith. So I have these big poster. Part of what I'd like us to do, I have big poster sheets. If you're more comfortable, if you're a visual person and you want to map it out on a big piece of paper, we have that. If you want to just take notes in front of you, can we spread out? We can go in the other room where we're going to have lunch, so you have room to sprawl. I want to take a few minutes and just pick one aspect of your ministry. One. Don't try to tackle the entire thing, right? Pick one aspect of your ministry. That could use more intentional reflection. Now, that can be something that's working. You're saying, I'm going to think about why. Why is it working? How do I delve deeper into that? Could be something that's totally bombing. And again, judgment-free zone. We try an awful lot of things at our organization that don't work as well as we thought that they would. Or it could be something that you're teasing out. Maybe, I want to do this a little bit differently. You want to incorporate adult mentors into your framework and you don't know how to do it. This is an exercise that we actually do quite a bit at our organization. This exercise 3 years ago led us to totally dismantle everything that we were doing, rebrand, we changed our name, literally changed everything. But it started with this very basic activity. It's called Four Helpful Lists. So the first thing that I want you to do is pick an aspect of your ministry that could use some more intentional reflection. And the second, we're going to go through this exercise. So you can write it down as a grid, like it's here. And you start with what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confused. Sometimes the framework of right and wrong doesn't feel right. I would say what's working, what's not working about it, what's missing and what's confused. So if you want to do that on big paper, you're welcome to. If you want to work in your notebooks, that's fine. There's a room right next door you can go to. steps, I can't say enough about Marisali and her team. She is such a resource. Give her a round of applause. Every time I'm in a public space with Archbishop Perez, I said, do you have any idea what you have in this woman? Because I'm at all of the national meetings, and I'll tell you, no one's doing this. No one is thinking in a visionary way about how do we take the leadership of Pope Francis? How do we follow the lead of the generational data? How do we do all this and try a paradigm shift? This is hard, hard, hard work. So talk to Marisali. She's a partner in this. As you're trying to pivot, you're trying to think through these strategies. Talk to me. Talk to Maggie. We love this. We're really excited about all of these different pieces. We're service geeks, so especially if you're thinking around service and protagonism and how do we equip and engage young people in that model of who am I, what's God's plans for my life. We've really sort of doubled down on that and doubled down on how do we make things and make these experiences transformational instead of transactional? I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's what we're about. Lifelong conversion is about transforming hearts and minds, right? And hands, we would say. You know, how do I go out in the world? Yeah. We have all sorts of videos. This is a podcast where we talk about what our research is, the pathways. Start dreaming, start doing, keep doing, I should say. You're already doing.